We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're still listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I am your host here. We're in our third segment of Wednesday, the 27th of November. Tomorrow will be Thanksgiving. And if you're caught at home tomorrow because of the bad weather and you can't travel to see family, then why don't you jump on YouTube and watch about 4 or 5 hours straight of AVN? By the end of that 4 or 5 hours, I'll have you so riled up that the top of your head will be coming off and smoke will be pouring out your ears. I have a lot of people that send me email that say, I love watching your show, but I'm so angry when I'm done with it. Well, part of the purpose of what we're doing here is to educate you, but bring to you the stuff that nobody else is telling you, you know? I have people tell me all the time, man, you're like days or weeks ahead in some cases of what the mainstream media is talking about. And that's because I am part of what you would call the alternative media, right? So I'm breaking stories and talking about things, and I'm analyzing and evaluating, and we're trying to identify and point out the slant that's given to you or the misdirection that's given to you, the propaganda. We point it out. We take a story and we tear it apart, and we read you their quotes, and then we talk and analyze. What does that quote really mean? What are they trying to say here? And we dig a little bit deeper than just, superficially mentioning, it appears President Obama wasn't completely truthful. No, he's a liar, and I'm not afraid to say it. This PC nonsense about, let's not really talk about anything. Let's just make sure everything is high level and bunk. All right. Rubio, story broken by Breitbart, alternative media. Breitbart's a good website, by the way. You should be going there on a routine basis. Breitbart, Washington Times, Free Beacon, right? These are great websites. And they have all kinds of stories up there that you won't see ever on the liberal news. And half the time only on Fox News, but after it's become such a big story, they got to cover it because otherwise they look like they're not doing their job. And even then when they do, like Common Core, they barely just skim the surface, Sometimes Fox reminds me of like when you take a rock and you skip it along the river and it just kind of boop, 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 boop. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. The problem that we have with this incident, with what Rubio is breaking here, is he's pointing out that there is a bailout provision in Obamacare buried deep within it. Of course, we had to pass it to find out what was in it, right? That authorizes what's called risk corridors. Talk about language that doesn't really mean what it says, right? That limits the amount of profit that insurers can make, but also protects them from losses. Aha, there's the key operative. We're not worried about how much profit they make. By the way, and since when is the government... How is the government legally allowed to control profit? I mean, is that the United States I grew up in? Is this the one I live in? Are they run in the same country I'm expecting to be called a free enterprise, free market, capitalist country? Yeah, you get the idea. So here's the deal. Buried inside the Obamacare package, the Obamacare nuclear weapon that's been detonated on America, there is the risk corridor section called 1342. And it authorizes the limits of what insurance providers can make profit-wise. And it also limits their losses. Now, the article says, while risk corridors can be structured in budget-neutral ways that protect the taxpayers, this particular bill did no such thing. And the reason they didn't is because after it was passed, they now wrote all the regulations and the administrative rules and the interpretations and all these executive actions the president's taking, and it further clarified. In other words, they took what was a pinhole loophole and they've dragged it open big enough to be the doorway to hell. Because what this says is the president, when he came out and made his statement that you could, I know I misled you. I'm sorry, America. And the temporary you can keep your plan fix, which is to allow you to continue to buy insurance through 2014 at the old plan that you had, right? He left out this important little detail, this little tidbit, this little itsy-bitsy polka dot bikini. And he left it up to the Department of Health and Human Services to acknowledge it in fine print. And here's what it says. And even when you read the fine print, unless you're critically analyzing this, you're never going to understand what it means. Though this transitional policy was not anticipated by health insurance issuers when setting rates for 2014, the Risk Corridor Program should help ameliorate unanticipated changes in premium revenue. We intend to explore ways to modify the Risk Corridor Program final rules to provide additional assistance. Let me tell you what that says translated. Although we expected that the website was going to work and that health insurers were going to be able to immediately rush in, right, like the waters of the Red Sea, and be able to sap Americans of all their money, they didn't anticipate the fact that they would lose money because the website didn't work and we completely bungled it. So we're exploring ways to modify the risk corridor for them by covering it with taxpayer money. That's what it really says, ladies and gentlemen. And they're going to cover it by passing new rules and regulations, which nobody has any accountability for, because these aren't people we elected. This is HHS and the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. These are the same sycophants who are running around spending hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money on websites that don't work, pumping millions of dollars into nonpartisan, navigator groups that are running around signing you up for Obamacare while simultaneously pumping into your mind, your feeble mind, how wonderful the Obama administration is to give you this brand new free health care. They're not telling you, by the way, that when you get kicked into Medicaid, you automatically lose assets, because those assets become seizable by Medicaid if you ever use the health services. So all the equity in your home can be stripped and taken from you. Any money you've got in the bank, it can all be taken away. No, they didn't tell you that. And you know what's funny? I've been saying this for months now, and nobody in the media is talking about this. Medicaid has rules. And the Medicaid rules say this: you cannot be on Medicaid unless you're indigent. And if you are found at some point in the future to have access to money, we get to seize it to pay ourselves back. So, yes, you're sitting there in a house that's worth, let's say, $250,000. You have a $100,000 mortgage. You've been prudent. You've been working hard to pay that mortgage off. You've been making double payments. You're out of work, or your income has been knocked down because you had a full-time job. Now you're knocked down to a part-time job, and your wife lost her job. So combined, you now qualify for Medicaid assistance in the Obama premium scam. Well, guess what? The minute you're signed up for Medicaid and the minute you use that insurance policy, all the equity in your home is gone. That $150,000 that you have in equity in your home's worth $250,000. You owe $100,000. It used to be worth $400,000, but because of the real estate market, it's now only worth $250,000. So now you've got $150,000 in equity in your home, but you're kicked onto the Medicaid rolls, and guess what? It's gone. They don't tell you that. Ask. Ask. Find it out for yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go look at the Medicaid rules in your state and find out what it is. But I'm going to tell you right now, and if I'm wrong, I'm challenging you to send me an email to mike@americasvoicenow.org and prove it. Show me the documentation that says by getting kicked out of the Medicaid rolls, you do not lose the equity in your home. Show it to me. I'll bet you're going to find out an ugly surprise. All your savings accounts, gone. Okay. On November 14th, the American Academy of Actuaries dumped out a statement saying that President Obama's plan to reverse the health insurance cancellations, in other words, his fix to his lie, quote, could lead to negative consequences for consumers, health insurers, and the federal government. Key operative word there was the federal government, because when they say the federal government, when they say consumers, they mean that, you know, your insurance rates could change. When they say health insurers, they mean the insurance companies can win or lose. When they say the federal government, they're talking about a bailout, and that means you're on the hook for it. They added into the end of this statement, costs to the federal government, which is us, could increase as higher than expected average medical claims are more likely to trigger risk corridor payments. So, here's the deal. When the insurance companies are losing money, they're going to submit the loss bill to the federal government and say, here, you owe us. And effectively, this is a blank check because we have no idea how high this bill could go. We don't, and you know why? Because the system doesn't work now. You can't even sign up for it. And even if you could sign up for it, we don't know how many people are off, how many people are on. We don't know how many people got kicked off. We don't know how many people are going to get kicked off. We don't know how many people are going to fall up underneath the new subsidized Medicaid and how many are not. We don't know how many. I mean, there's just so many unknowns. In other words, President Obama's November 14th decree that you can, you know, that he's offering the fix. In other words, President Obama's November 14th fix decree can only be implemented if the American taxpayer provides a bailout safety provision that we fund. Wow. Wow. Did you not grasp that? Tell you what. There is so much wrong with Obamacare that these Senate Democrats who approved it, and the Senate and the House Democrats who signed this bill into law should actually be charged with malfeasance. Why? Well, one, they never read the bill, and they voted for it. So they weren't sure of what the implications were going to be because they never read the 2,000 pages. It's just too lengthy for us, they said. Secondarily, once they did pass it, which was in and of itself the malfeasance, they then handed it off to HHS and literally tens of thousands of unaccountable, subdelegated minions to write regulations for it that they couldn't even approve or deny. There's so many of them, they don't even know. There's 20,000 pages, ladies and gentlemen, of rules and regulations. If they couldn't read the 2,000-page bill, surely they didn't read the 10-foot high stack of 20,000 regulations that, by the way, are actually stated to only represent 1/3 of the total regulatory writings that are going to be done to make Obamacare work. And it's implementing, in 30 days, and they've only written 1/3 of the regulations. That means This is an animal that can be added on parts to, stuck on, as, when, and where they need to. Talk about a Frankenstein monster. And we're on the hook for it. We're on the hook for it not only in higher premiums, not only in higher deductibles, not only in limiting our doctors, not only in limiting our hospital access, but we're also then doubly on the hook for the losses associated through it that are going to fall back to us as taxpayers to cover. The only people who are going to benefit from Obamacare are those who are going to get a free ride. That's the simple, raw truth. That is the truth, ladies and gentlemen. And everything else is marketing, hype, and BS. The only people that are going to benefit from Obamacare are going to be those people who had no insurance before. And whether or not they had insurance, they didn't have insurance because they couldn't afford it, or whether they didn't have insurance because they didn't want it, or whether they didn't have insurance because they were irresponsible. In other words, could afford it, but blew their money on other junk. We're all going to pay the price for that. All of us. If you work, if you pay taxes, you're going to pay the price. If you have an income that is above the poverty level, you're going to pay the price. And you're going to pay the price not once, but as many times as they can keep going around on the merry-go-round and slapping you across the face. I mean, every time the merry-go-round turns, they hit you again. You're getting hit for raised premiums. You're getting hit for raised deductibles. You're getting hit for limitations on what doctors you can go to, which means if you want to keep the doctor you had, you got to go out there and cancel, or you got to go outside of your policy and pay them privately and directly. You're going to get hit because there's death panels in this whole thing, and that came out the other day, and they are absolutely death panels. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You're going to get hit because you're on the hook as a taxpayer to cover the losses associated with this to the insurance companies, and then you're fully on the hook because the government is paying for all the ne'er-do-wells and the indigent and the poor and the hapless and the helpless with taxpayer money. So you're getting triple whacked here. I mean, you're getting hit when the bill comes due to cover the insurer's losses under a bailout, and then you're going to have to pay the stupendous amount of Medicaid costs that's going to be associated with this. I mean, a think tank group that came out the other day and said that they are fully expecting that the bill for health care in the United States of America is going to cost the federal government $5 trillion per annum year in 2020. $5 trillion, people. I mean, we're already broke and we're bankrupt already. We already have a deficit of almost $1 trillion. Where are you going to come up with the extra scratch to cover $5 trillion? And you're telling me an economic collapse is not imminent? You got to be kidding me. They're saying next year alone it could be as high as $3 trillion. The T word, not the B word. The T word. Trillion. We're already $800 billion, almost $1 trillion in a deficit hole every year now. We're borrowing 40 cents on every dollar. I mean, if you look at the U.S. Debt clock, the federal deficit is already, I mean, look, our entire gross domestic revenue product isn't even close to covering our debt now. Or I should say our bills. In other words, we're racking in. So far, we've got federal spending. I just pulled it up here. And you can go to this by going to usdebtclock.org, by the way. I'm telling you, I look at this thing almost every day. First of all, it's amazing to see what the numbers change like. I know that I was doing this show a couple of months ago, and I was telling you that debt per citizen when you were born as a child, your debt was $50,000. and this was a couple of months ago. In other words, a baby born today, or a baby born 4 months ago, was on the hook for $50,000. Today, as of right now, it's $54,221. A couple of months later, people, a baby born in 2016 is going to be responsible for what? $60,000, $65,000, $70,000? That's not per taxpayer. That's per living, human, breathing being. Our total debt right now is $17.2 trillion. Our federal spending is $3.477 trillion, and our budget deficit is $661 billion right now. I mean, it's stunning to me. The gross domestic product is, our total federal, state, and local spending is $6.152 trillion. You got to be kidding me. Our whole gross domestic product is only $16 trillion. So we make $16 trillion a year as a country, and $6 trillion of that is spent on government. What? The actual total debt, by the way, don't think of the national debt. Think of the total debt, which includes, interest and all this other stuff, is $60 trillion. And when you count in derivatives, the poison, the toxic stuff, it's 714. Here's the problem. We're so far upside down at this point that sitting here and trying to say to us that we are responsible for bailing out insurance companies on top of all the other responsibilities that we have is criminally malfeasant. And every Democratic senator that voted for this plan should be ripped out of their seat by the roots. If you don't have a senator up for election, but you have state recall capability, then I would strongly encourage you to start that process in your state to remove that senator and remove the House member if they voted for Obamacare. Now remember, not a single Republican voted for Obamacare in either the House or the Senate. Not a single one. So the Democrats 100% own Obamacare. Lock, stock, and barrel. I'm not giving the Republicans a pass here because they okayed the funding of it, which they shouldn't have done. Which is, in my thinking, that means that all of them are subject to removal. But let's attack the real, let's take the tip of the spear here and really sharpen it. If you have a Democratic senator or a Democratic House member, remove them. And if you cannot remove them because they're not up for election this year, a lot of senators aren't, right? They do it in they do it in tiers of 2 years each. So you may have, like, my senators in my state aren't up for election until 2016 and then 2018, unfortunately. And we've got Claire McCaskill, the boot-licking monster. 70% of Missouri said we don't want Obamacare. She voted for it anyway. Says it doesn't really matter what you all want. I'm telling you what you want. If you've got a senator like that, we don't have a recall provision in my state. If you have one in yours, grab them by the collar, rip them out by the roots like a bad infected tooth, and dispose of them. And then take some Tea Party and some libertarian and constitutional penicillin to make sure you don't get an infection. Look, the truth of the matter is, it's up to us to start taking action against those who have become not only your oppressor, but demonic in that oppression. You're going to pay for this in so many ways. You haven't even begun to smell the cost of this boondoggle. And all of it, you've heard me say it 1,000 times, so I'm not going to reiterate it and beat it to death again. All of it, because it's not about healthcare. It's all about gathering your data. It's data mining. That's what this is for. It's control of the economy and data mining. That's it. And they really couldn't give a rat's rear end whether you get health care, whether you get a needle or you get the chemotherapy you need or the sniffly, runny nose pill you need. They don't really care. Come on, you got to be kidding me. You think these people up in Congress, any of them from either party, really care about you? The only time they pay you any heed or any mind whatsoever is in the last 6 months before an election. Then suddenly they're coming around telling you how grateful they are for your support. But in the Congress's place, they couldn't care less about you for the 18 months before the election. In the case of a senator, it's even worse. They couldn't care about you for the last 4.5 years before, 5.5 years before an election. You can't get them to pay attention to you if you were on fire. And they were standing right there with a full glass of water. And suddenly, now, they want to pay attention to you. Don't be buffaloed by them. They're scum. They're liars, thieves, psychopathic, sociopathic cutthroats. Every one of them. I don't even trust Rubio and Cruz and Mike. Look, I mean, if I had to pick a couple of guys that I really like up there, I'd say it was Cruz and Mike from Utah. I can't think of the last name. But I got to tell you, Rubio here is flipped on. He's like a fish out of water. This guy, bing, bop, bing, bop, bing, bop. You never know what side he's coming from. He's so desperate to give himself a legacy that he can run for the White House next year, or in 2016, that, he can't keep himself together. But the truth of the matter is, listen, there's not an honest one among them. Not an honest one. I will give credit to Cruz and Mike Rogers, because Mike Lee, these guys have gone in there and they are warriors for the truth and liberty. And Cruz especially. And there's some things he's done I don't like either. But I got to say, he's the guy who stood up there and said, let's shut the government. You know what? Most Americans right now would say, you know what? We should have kept the government shut down if it would have killed this monstrosity. Good Lord, people. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Well, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a break right now. My producer is going to have kittens if I don't. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the National Park Service, the scenic riverways, and abuse and misuse of you and our land, and how they're raging across the nation in concert with the EPA and the state EPA mini-me's to destroy American land ownership, sovereignty, and everything else. We'll be right back. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. If this is your first time joining us, thank you very much. You can send me email at mike@americasvoicenow.org. I want to hear feedback from you. If you like or disagree or don't like or agree with anything I've stated here, let me know about it. I try to answer each email individually. Do me a favor, by the way. I get a bunch of emails that say, I disagree with you. Watch this video. And then I click through to that, and YouTube doesn't even have the video on there. Don't do that. Tell me why you disagree with me. Don't give me somebody else's diatribe. That's part of critical thinking skills. You express to me why you disagree with me. I don't want to hear why they disagree. I want to hear why you do. That's your job. Formulate your own opinion. We'll be right back.